The doctors looked at the exhausted mother, with deep dark circles under her eyes and trembling hands, and said with a coldness that cut through the air, "Your son will never speak. He will never connect with anyone. He will never have a normal life. The best thing you can do is institutionalize him and move on." Samahria Kaufman did not cry in front of them. She waited until she reached the car. And then, with baby Raun asleep in the back seat, she let the tears stream down her face. But amidst the crying, something happened inside her. A flame ignited where there should have been only ashes. She wasn't going to abandon her son. She was going to enter his world. This is the true story of Raun Kaufman, a boy whom experts declared lost forever, and the parents who refused to accept that verdict. It was 1973. New Jersey, United States. Barry Neil Kaufman and his wife Samahria were a young couple, full of dreams when their third child was born. Raun Kaufman was born perfect. At least, that's what it seemed like. In the first few months, everything was going well. Raun nursed, slept, and grew. His parents made plans. They dreamed of his first step, his first word, his first mommy. But something slowly changed, almost imperceptibly, like the tide receding before a storm. Raun stopped responding when his name was called. He stopped making eye contact. He stopped pointing at things. He stopped babbling. He stopped showing interest in his sisters, who loved playing with him. Instead of all that, something strange and disturbing emerged. Raun spent hours, whole hours, spinning a small plastic plate on the floor. He would spin it. Stop. Spin it again. His eyes fixed on the circular motion, as if that plate were the only real object in the universe. Barry stood in the doorway of the room, watching his son, and felt a chill in his chest that he couldn't name. Round. Round. Look at Daddy. Nothing. The little plate was spinning when Raun turned 18 months old. The Kaufmans took their son to a series of specialists, pediatricians, neurologists, child psychiatrists. Each appointment was another piece of their heart being broken. The final diagnosis came like a death sentence: severe autism, IQ below 30, profound and irreversible disability. Institutionalization is recommended. That's all, said one of the doctors, adjusting his glasses with an indifference that Barry never forgot. There are suitable places for children like him. You have other daughters. You need to think about them too. Barry and Samahria left the doctor's office in silence, but inside each of them, something had changed. It wasn't despair. It was determination. While the world around them suggested accepting the diagnosis and moving on, Barry and Samahria did the opposite. They chose to fight, but not just any fight. Barry was a writer and philosopher. Samahria was a woman of powerful intuition, and together, they arrived at a conclusion that went against everything that medicine of the time preached. If Raun had withdrawn into himself, perhaps it wasn't because he didn't want to connect. Perhaps it was because the world outside was too frightening, too noisy, too incomprehensible for him. What if, instead of forcing Raun out of his world, they entered his world? Friends thought it was crazy. Family members disapproved. Doctors said it was a waste of time. Barry and Samahria ignored them all. They transformed the bathroom at home into a workroom. White walls, no distractions, no outside noise. And every day, for hours on end, one of them would stay in there with Raun to teach him, not to correct him, but simply to accompany him. When Raun spun the plate, they grabbed a plate and spun it along. When Raun swayed his body, they swayed along. When Raun was silent, they were silent. No judgment, no correction, no forcing. Just presence, just love. 4 weeks, nothing seemed to change. Raun kept spinning the plate. He kept avoiding eye contact. He remained in his own private, silent world. And the neighbors whispered. The relatives questioned. The doctors waited, skeptical. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, it happened. Samahria was sitting on the bathroom floor, spinning her own little plate, when she felt a light weight on her shoulder. She didn't move. She barely breathed. Slowly, with her heart racing, she turned her face away. Raun was looking at her. It wasn't a vague, distant look, lost in nothingness, as it had always been. It was a real look. Direct, present. For perhaps 3 seconds, which seemed like 3 hours, Son looked into his mother's eyes. And then he turned away. He went back to the little plate. But Samahria was trembling. Inside those brown eyes, for the briefest of moments, she had seen her son. Not a lost child, not a diagnosis, not a medical sentence, a person. She ran to tell Barry, and the two hugged and cried in the hallway while their daughters watched, confused. But they did understand. The method was working. In the following months, the Kaufmans delved even deeper. They recruited volunteers, university students, close friends, and created a rotation schedule so that Raun would never be without company. Always someone present. Always someone willing to enter his world without demanding anything in return. Barry documented everything in a diary. Every tiny step forward, every glance, every moment of contact. And those moments became more frequent. Raun began to observe the adults with more curiosity. He started to imitate small gestures. He began to approach them timidly, like a wild animal beginning to trust humans. And then came the day that Barry would describe as the most beautiful of his entire life. He was in the room with Raun, the two of them sitting on the floor, when the boy who still couldn't speak, whom the doctors had said he never would, looked at his father, opened his mouth, and said, "No, that's all." One syllable. Barry stood motionless. He didn't celebrate. He didn't jump. He didn't frighten his son with an exaggerated reaction. He simply replied, with his usual calm, "No." The repeated round. "No." Father and son. "I. Tu. A." A one-syllable conversation. Raun's first conversation ever. What happened in the following 2 years defied all medical logic of the time. Raun kept moving forward, slowly but steadily. Syllables became words. Words became short sentences. Sentences became questions. The boy who should never have communicated began to ask questions about the world. The boy who should never have interacted began to play with his sisters. The boy who should never have had a normal life began to laugh. When Raun turned 4, Barry and Samahria took him back to the specialists, the same ones who had given their son a diagnosis. The doctors were silent as the child played, talked, and smiled in the waiting room. One of them, the most senior, asked to examine Raun alone for a few minutes. When he came out of the small room, he was pale. I don't know how to explain what happened," he said, choosing his words carefully. "This boy no longer meets any of the criteria for severe autism. He's within the typical developmental spectrum for his age." Barry and Samahria looked at each other. They said nothing. They didn't need to, and this is where the story ceases to be merely beautiful and becomes extraordinary. Because Raun Kaufman grew up. Raun Kaufman, the boy doctors pronounced dead at 18 months. The boy who spun plates for hours. The boy who was never supposed to speak, never supposed to connect with others, never supposed to have a normal life. Graduated with honors from Brown University, one of the most prestigious universities in the United States. He became a writer. He became an international speaker. He became the director of the Sunrise Institute, founded by his parents, where today he himself helps other families of autistic children around the world. Raun traveled to dozens of countries. He gave lectures to audiences of thousands of people. He wrote books. He got married. He built a full, meaningful, connected life. A life the doctors said would be impossible. And when people ask him what it's like to carry that past, what it's like to know that experts had sentenced him as a baby, Raun responds with the calm of someone who has made peace with his own history. "I am grateful for autism. It made me who I am, and I am grateful for my parents, who never saw me through the lens of my diagnoses. They always saw me for who I am." If you're watching this video and you have an autistic child, or know someone who does, I want you to take one thing away from this story. Diagnoses describe current limitations. They do not describe the future. Barry and Samahria Kaufman didn't have infinite resources. They didn't have special connections. They didn't have a magic formula. They allow patience and the absolute refusal to see their son as a problem to be solved, but rather as a person to be known. Raun Kaufman is living proof that entering a child's world can be more powerful than trying to tear them away from it. If this story touched you, Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Until next time,